Hi and welcome everyone to Nikki Loves Books. I am so happy to say that today we are doing a book review. So we are doing a book review of The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. So this book was the November Young Adult Bookish Box book. And of course, when we say November, we're talking about November 2022. This is 2023, but it's April. So we haven't gotten there yet. I am happy to say that I enjoyed this book. I did give it a 7 out of 10, so 3.5 out of 5. So this is no Jane Austen. This is not epic writing, but was I entertained? Absolutely. I did categorize this book as a fantasy romance. So there are fantasy elements, like the whole book is based in a fantasy world. There's fae, there's witches, there's magic. So it is definitely fantasy. And there is an overall plot, which we'll talk about a little bit. But for me, I really felt like the overall driving force of this book was the romance. So that was kind of like the main focus. And everything else was secondary to that romance, if that makes sense. And for me, that is what a fantasy romance is. Like, this is literally more about two characters falling in love than really anything else in the book. I like fantasy romances because it's literally the best of both worlds. I love fantasy, I love romance. Let's just throw them together. It's a fantastic recipe. So I am all about my fantasy romance books. So always with my book reviews, I'm going to give you a small little summary of what the book is about. And we're actually going to use the Bookish Box description because why not? They described it so well without giving away too much detail. And then I'm going to go over a few of my favorite things I like about it, talk about things I didn't like about the book, and then end with the last couple major things that I loved about the book. So a brief little summary about The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. And again, this is the Bookish Box description. 13 years fleeing witch hunters, Remy knows she is possibly the last Red Witch alive, and she is determined to stay that way. The Northern Court King has slaughtered her home court and placed a bounty on Red Witch heads. When four Fae warriors enter her tavern refuge, the handsome Prince Hale of the Eastern Kingdom wants to stop a war with the Northern Court before his kingdom befalls the same fate as Remy's. He needs a Red Witch, and Remy may be the only person alive who can help him. For the chance to save herself, her people, and help defeat the Northern King, Remy must put her faith in Hale and his companions on a dangerous quest to find lost relics. So that was our little brief summary of The High Mountain Court. Let's go ahead and jump into what I liked about the book. So again, I did give this book 7 out of 10, so we got 7 things to talk about that are good. I did have a few things that I didn't like about the book, which of course is going to happen. So right off the bat, I liked the world building. So again, this is a fantasy novel. So the world is interesting in the sense that it has fae, it has humans, it also has witches. There's magic, there are magical items. So again, going back to that summary, they're looking for relics. These are magical items that they need for their quests to defeat the Northern Court. I like all of this. It's not necessarily unique only to this book. There's plenty of books that have fae, magic, relics, all that jazz. But I still enjoy them, and I did find that it was intriguing enough, especially when you get into the politics. So I'm someone who, if you want to talk about politics in our world, like, no thank you. I don't want to deal with that shit right now because it's a fucking mess, as it always is in America as long as I've been alive. But politics in a fantasy novel, I am so game. It's actually probably one of the main reasons why I liked Game of Thrones was because of the politics. So the High Mountain Court does have that political intrigue also of, who's actually allies, who's pretending to be an ally and is going to stab you in the back. What is the Northern Court's actual agenda? And who actually really sides with them, or who is pretending to side with them to kind of keep your friends close but your enemies closer. So I really liked all those aspects of the world. Number 2 was actually the witches, and specifically the fact that there's 5 kingdoms and then there's 5 different types of witches. So specific witches go to a specific kingdom. The High Mountain Court is one of the kingdoms in the book that has red witches, and they have a specific magic, just like a different court might have brown witches who have a specific magic. So red witches can move objects. You have witches who are healers, and I believe those are the brown witches, if I'm not mistaken. And then you also have ones that can see the future, and I believe those are the blue witches. I did also really like that aspect of, wasn't just a witch had all these different powers. It was, you know, depending on what type of witch you were born with certain powers, and that's all you got. But it makes it more interesting because then you see that dynamic between a court, what kind of witches they have, and how they actually utilize that type of witch in their culture and community. So definitely love that. Number 3 that I liked about the High Mountain Court was the subject of family. I do like the fact that the High Mountain Court did touch upon a lot of family themes. And as you can imagine, it makes sense with the main character, Remy, having her whole family slaughtered. So there's a lot of scenes with her remembering how her siblings were brought up, their interactions. I always appreciate that theme because people have very different experiences with family. And I felt like this book did a good job of showing that complication of, you love these people, but they can also be very hurtful. You can end up with a lot of regrets when they pass for wrongs that you think that you did. So there is that complication that is really explored in this book, and I do appreciate that. Number 4 is similar, but it's about friends. I did really like the friendships that we see between the male main character and the female main character. So they both kind of have their own little, like, I hate to say it, but like groupies, people that they're always around, that they go on adventures with, they've lived with, they camp with. And I really appreciate that dynamic because in a lot of ways, especially when you're missing family or family's not a good fit for you, which does happen. It might be a dysfunctional family. It might be that there's abuse, drugs, alcohol, mental illness. There's a lot of reasons why families don't mesh well or there's a dysfunction. The important thing is that we can have a different type of family, and that's a family with friends. So people who do accept us, who treat us with respect, who don't abuse us, and that is just as acceptable. Do we wish we had a good family and people that we're related to and can be connected with? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that friends are any less than what a family is. And I just really appreciated the dynamic that we see in the High Mountain Court of these kind of found families with friends. With that being said, that actually does take us into the very first thing that I did not like about the High Mountain Court. And that is, I really felt like there wasn't enough focus of the side characters. There was some really great side characters in this that were fun. There was good banter, and it just wasn't enough. You know, they were literally side characters to the point where we don't know too much about them. So there was a great dynamic between the side characters with the male main character and the female main character, as I mentioned earlier. But there just still wasn't enough. Like, we didn't really have enough time with these characters to really get to know them and to enjoy them more. So the second thing that I did not care for in this book was the fact that there were some things that were repetitive, if that makes sense. So it's like the author almost forgot and the editor didn't pick it up, where the author said something at the beginning of the book and then it's repeated, you know, a few chapters in, and then you go a few more chapters and it's said again and you're just like, dude, I fucking got it. Like, we don't need to keep rehashing this out. You know, and maybe that's a personal ick. I just really don't like things to be repeated. Maybe some readers like it because it helps, you know, solidify an idea, remind them of a certain quirk of a character or a certain important fact about a plot or like what's happening in the world. It just bugged me. And thirdly, so the very last thing that I could say was an issue for me in the High Mountain Court was the fact that even though there's some heavy feelings in this book, it wasn't actually felt. So I don't cry from my own stuff, which is really bad, I know. But books, I usually use the books in movies. You know, a lot of times I'll watch a movie that will like stab me in the heart and then twist, and that will get the waterworks going. And I usually have the same experience with books. A lot of times books. If you follow me on TikTok, I talked about how Sarah J. Maas literally gets me, I think, every single series she's had. Like, I cry, and nothing was worse than Crescent City. Shit, that fucking killed me. Anyways, this book, literally, female main character had her whole family slaughtered, had her whole court slaughtered. Obviously, this is a big thing with her backstory, and so she spends a lot of time reminiscing about what happened, the people she misses, why she misses them. And there's not enough feeling, like there's not that anguish that you would expect. I just don't think the author put in enough effort to convey those feelings for it to actually be felt by the reader. I just feel like there was something missed there of not having that feeling more drawn out from the character to the reader. But at the same time too, Remy, our female lead, is also someone who shoves down her feelings and doesn't like to feel. So we could put it as, oh, you know, like she doesn't think about it too much or doesn't think about those feelings too much because she doesn't want to fall apart. Again, like I said, I just don't think that there is enough emotional connection between us and the character and those feelings, because I feel like those feelings, especially when the character was in private moments, would be very, very deep and very, very painful. That is it for the things I didn't like about the High Mountain Court. And I'm like, it's just 3. They're really not that big of a deal, and they might not bother a lot of readers. Those are just my personal icks. My 5th thing that I liked about this book, no surprise to anyone who watches my channel, is the fact that this is a romance. I am a romance junkie. I wish I could read romance every day, all day, maybe sleep for 5 hours and just go right back to reading and somehow maintain a fit, healthy body and have money without doing anything else. I don't know, that's the dream. Anyways, so I loved the fact that this was a romance. I really enjoyed that it was a slow burn. This is an enemies to lovers book, which I always love those. Those are my absolute favorite trope. It also had the one horse trope. That leads to some fun, which we'll bring up in my next favorite thing about the High Mountain Court. It also is about fated mates. So this again is a slow burn, fated mates, enemies to lovers, one horse, fantasy romance. There were so many good scenes between our 2 main characters, and that brings us to number 6. So again, this was the young adult bookish box book for November. This book has some spice. I was like, are we sure this is a young adult book? Because I would not classify this as a young adult book. Historically, young adult books don't have spice. I've always kind of felt like young adult specifically like kind of skips over that. Like, yeah, there can be some warmth, there can be some brewing there, but any actual sex scenes, it's like, oh, and then they tumbled in bed, you know, and then that's where the scene ends, and then it's like the next chapter. Like, they don't go into detail. Like, there was some detail in this that I was not expecting, and I'm still like, I don't think that this is a young adult book. And I'm not saying that, oh my god, this should not be classified as a young adult book. I was just very pleasantly surprised. So there is some spice in this book, and it's some good spice. There were some scenes that was just like, damn, I fucking wish I was there and I was the participant, because that sounds Spice level, I would actually probably put it at a 2. So it's not like super spicy. Top of my head, in this book, I'd say that there's 4 scenes that I was like, that's hot. And only 2 of the scenes were like full-blown intercourse. The other ones were the appetizers, where things are getting hot and heavy, but it doesn't get very far. But all 4 scenes were nice. So I enjoyed the spice in this book. And so the very last thing that I liked about the High Mountain Court, because this is going to be number 7, is it's a series. So this is The Witch's Blade. So this is book 2. I have not read it yet, but I bought it. It's on my to-read shelf, and as soon as I'm able to, I am planning on reading it. I believe there's more books after this one. The other thing that I think, again, have not read the second book, so I can't say for sure, but what I'm excited about is that I think the next book focuses on different characters. I do believe Remy and Hale, so the 2 main characters in this book, will still be in the next books, because it's a series. There's politics going on, there's wars happening, you know, there's shit that are interconnected, but I don't believe that they're going to be the main focus. I think that they're going to end up being the side characters that we barely get any information from, other than like, oh, hey, you guys are here, hi. And generally, I love romance series that do that. I like knowing then I'm going to get involved with a couple, they're going to have their happily ever after, and then I get to move to a new couple and they get to fall in love, and then so on and so forth, while still having the world building and the other interesting tidbits of the story in the background continue. So I'm really looking forward to reading The Witch's Blade and continuing on the story and finding out what happens to the characters. Hopefully we see some of those side characters that we met in the High Mountain Court in the future books, and maybe they'll end up being main characters, and that would be awesome. And that is it. That is it for my book review of the High Mountain Court. I hope you liked this book review. If you did, please give me a like and let me know if you're wanting to read this book or if you have read this book and what your thoughts and experiences were with it. I'd love to hear it. And thank you all so much for being here. I hope to catch you next time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so we can talk about more books in the future and see more unboxing videos. Thank you so much, everyone.